meeting to order, a joint meeting between the Minnehaha County and Sioux Falls Planning Commissions with a few brief introductory comments. As a courtesy tonight, make sure everyone here has their cell phones turned off. The two planning commissions work together on land use and zoning matters within the rural areas surrounding the city. This area is displayed hopefully on the screen. After information and testimony is presented on the agenda item, the members will discuss the matter, and then each planning commission will vote independently to arrive at a decision. When the joint agenda is completed, the planning commission will adjourn, and the meeting will continue as the county planning commission considers its item beyond the joint zoning jurisdiction. Any final action taken on the conditional use permit request will take effect 5 working days following this meeting unless a written appeal of tonight's decision is filed in the county planning office by Monday, July 3rd at 5 p.m. In the event of an appeal, the decision will be referred to the county commission and city council for their joint hearing on Tuesday, July 25th at 5 p.m. at Carnegie Town Hall at 235 West 10th Street. Okay, is there a motion to approve the May 22nd Joint Planning Commission meeting? Minutes, excuse me.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve our Joint Planning Commission meetings. So there, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
On the city side, approval of minutes from May 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries on the city side.
Okay, thank you. We have one item on the there's no consent agenda. So last staff report on item number 2. Conditional use permit 1735 to exceed 1,200 square feet of accessory building. Petitioner is Michael Vanden Bosch.
That was actually on consent.
What's that?
That was actually on consent.
Oh, when the, I would move that it be there, not, I'd be the objection that, I
Oh,
want it
okay.
in the regular, I'm sorry. But on my minutes, the notes they gave me to read, it says, since there are no consent agenda items, so that's what I read. That's right. Yeah, we just went to minutes, we didn't say anything about the consent agenda. But there is one item on the consent agenda then, am I correct or not?
So I move to put that on the regular agenda.
All right, do I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move item number 2 to the regular agenda. All those in favor signify by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We move that to the regular agenda.
On
Item
the
number
city side,
2.
motion
Motion
to
to-
move to the regular agenda.
Second.
You made the motion.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, let's hear item number 2. David Heinold will be presenting.
Good evening, Commission. David Heinold, Planning Department. We have a request for conditional use permit 17-39 is to exceed 1,200 square feet of total accessory building area. The total request is 1,735 square feet. Is different from mentioned in the narrative because it didn't include an 8x10 chicken coop that was located on the property. So that number was changed in the from the narrative to 1735 in the request and sent out. The notices were sent out reflecting that number. So that number in the narrative is wrong. It didn't account for that chicken coop. The site plan. First, back up. This area is located about a quarter mile north of Interstate 90. It's located on the county highway there, extending just northward from there, that exit, interstate exit. And so skipping forward to the site plan, the property, as you can see, the road is right here. The driveway is just on the north side of this image in the site plan. It bends around and comes back towards the property. Property boundary runs just on the north side of the house, which is located right here. The site plan shows a 15 by 30 and a half foot, basically horse shelter. That is the building. staff went out as a code enforcement issue and because there was a building built on the property, so we did that, and hence the request for a conditional use permit came in because they were over the 1,200 square foot requirement for an area that's a lot that's in an area of more than 4 subdivided lots, which is hence the reason for the public hearing. This area is to provide, the petitioner has stated, to provide shelter for 3 equine, a horse, a mule, and a donkey, which is just south of a roughly 1,197 square foot building, as you can see right here in the image in the white area, just north of where that horse shelter is located. And in addition to that, just in between, pretty much in between those 2 buildings, is an 8x10 chicken coop, as I mentioned, bringing that request up to a total of 1,735 square feet. Going through some of the existing accessory building sizes and skipping forward, and just doing a review of what's already out there. For reference, the property to the immediate south of the subject property has about 1,848 square feet of total accessory building area on just over 11 acres of land. And then similarly, there's other properties that are just less than the petitioner's amount of 1,735 with about 1,440 and 1,500 square feet that are located on similar sized lots of a range of between 1.65 acres all the way up to 5 acres, so smaller lot sizes, and then even larger than that with a 10-acre lot. So going back and just going through a brief history of the complaint and what staff has discussed on the property and has been working with the property owner to address through the county public nuisance ordinance, because there was items that were related to junk, scrap, building materials. Skipping forward, these are the 3 buildings I mentioned. And this is a current picture of what's located at the property now. The fencing material that was a part of the original complaint is now up in the yard next to that 1,197 square foot building. This is that chicken coop area, and then the building is actually back in the distance, as you can see right there. This is what was stated. There was a lot of scrap wood that was also noted in the original complaint that was lying around the yard, and tires. Staff, I met with the applicant, and they indicated that the tires are being used as a retaining wall to be able to get to that horse shelter. As you can see in the image there, the tires in the background. So going through, initially we received a complaint on April 13th, went out there on that the following day on April 14th, and found a number of things, like I said, the piles of tires, leftover building materials. In one of these in this image right here, can't really see it, but there's some siding material that was left over from a project before. And then, as you can see, some additional materials are located, just roofing material and shingles, and the area, and you have an old tractor which is located at the front of the property or at the beginning of the driveway just off the highway, as well as additional materials, building materials in storage containers and different miscellaneous items, and other items. And just moving forward, we received, so we sent out a letter on April 17th, and a few days later we received another complaint that more stuff was brought in, more tires, junk, etc., onto the property. So on May 2nd, which is the second site visit, so you can see in the pictures here in discussing with the applicant, the property owner, the subject property. The first picture I was walked through, this is a horse trailer that was unlicensed. And you can see some of the other images with the trailers that were being brought onto the property with these items, miscellaneous materials. And here's a close-up picture of that siding material that I was talking about, the leftover building material. And then there was some complaints about the four-wheelers and just the barrels and scrap iron poles, and then again, the tractor, the old yellow tractor, which the applicant has stated to me that it runs, and they are working on trying to sell that. Moving forward, and then you can see in that image, you also see more items located along the garage to the house. This is the attached garage. So after that, the property was mostly cleaned up, and then we received another complaint about 2 weeks later than that of more stuff being brought onto the property, more trailers. And so we sent out another letter for this. And you can see additional areas. There's some improvement on about a month later from that initial visit of when we received the couple of complaints. The four-wheelers have moved from the house area down to the garage, which was stated that they weren't being operational, which have been moved. The trailers full of stuff have been emptied out, so you can see right here that there's nothing there. And there's also a few lawnmowers that were stated to be non-operational that have moved locations, and as you'll see, there will be a different location for them. And again, the tractor still remains there, the yellow tractor. And this is that blue trailer that you saw in the background at the bottom of that hill in that first set of images. Another thing that was of issue was the wooden spools, which, talking to the applicant, is being used for personal enjoyment of the property and in a project as a playground. And so this brings me to my last set of slides, which is today, or just this afternoon, went out and took some pictures of the site conditions of what was removed from the property, because I've been in communication with the applicant about removing the leftover building material such as the siding, and taking care of the horse trailer, which the horse trailer that was located in this vicinity, in this area right here, has been removed from the property. The wooden spools are still in the same spot next to the house, and the barrels have been cleaned up. They're not located inside the truck or just lying around. There's an area right in front of that fence material that was used right in front of the about 1,200 square foot building. There were some barrels that were located around there, those have been cleaned up around that building. Overall, in summary, staff feels that there's been significant progress towards meeting those conditions as the steps have gone on. So I'll just go through some of the images that I took of just some of the buildings, and getting back to the accessory building size, the appropriateness to the surrounding area, which is the planning commissions are deciding on the land use of the property or the requested size. This is the property that is just to the south of the subject property. There's a collection of buildings. This is the biggest building on that property, and this is that 1,800 square foot size. And then additional properties, these are taken just to the north. These are a little bit further to the north. These aren't on the map, but these are taken of just properties that are of similar composition to the property owner's property. Moving forward, this is the same. This is actually located north and west of the county highway. It's one of those properties that was off in the distance, about a quarter mile to the north of that subject property. And going through, so what the planning commissions take into account the conditional use permit criteria. There's 4. The impact of the proposed use on adjacent properties shall be a major consideration. The proposed use should be generally compatible with adjacent properties and other properties in the district. The proposed use for a 3-sided shelter for the petitioner's horses should not have a significant effect on surrounding residential and agricultural properties, because as you noted, there are residential to the north and to the south, and then to the east. To the east and the west are both agricultural properties. Area is primarily agricultural, with about 6 or so single-family dwellings within a quarter mile of each other, located within that subdivision of more than 4 lots. There are existing accessory building sizes, namely the one to the south. They're larger than the requested size of 1,735 square feet in the surrounding area. Number 2, that measures shall be taken to ensure that the proposed use does not alter the general character of the area or neighborhood. The accessory building size may only be used for residential purposes. There's no commercial or business-oriented activities allowed. The property is zoned A1 agricultural, which allows a keeping of a limited number of livestock such as horses, mules, chickens for your own personal use. You're not allowed to use them for commercial operation or receiving money for them. However, failure to maintain the subject property where the livestock are kept and maintained according to the public nuisance ordinance, which is the county's ordinance, the zoning ordinance that Sioux Falls and the county share, and the animal control ordinance, because there was an issue with the animal control and a complaint about that, but that's addressed through the Humane Society, which the county has a contract with, and failure to maintain these could or may cause significant impacts to those surrounding property owners, just with general things like smell, or if there's manure piles, which is in the public nuisance ordinance, as far as addressing that on a case-by-case basis. 3, the effects of noise, odor, traffic, air and water pollution, and other negative factors shall be eliminated or controlled through the use of screening, setbacks, and orientation. There are no offensive nuisances that are permitted at any time during the use of this proposed building, or the horse shelter. Any lighting should be directed downward onto the property in order to prevent any light spilling off-site or onto adjacent properties. The complaint also noted that shingles have been blowing off of the horse shelter, 3-sided horse shelter, which must meet the current adopted building code for the county. 4, the proposed use shall not adversely affect the public. The proposed accessory building should not have effect on the health, safety, and general welfare of the public, provided that all of the regulations included that I mentioned are being met, that are addressed on a complaint basis. The use of the 3-sided horse shelter for private use and storage will create few problems to neighboring properties. The Envision 2035 comprehensive plan identifies the area just outside the transition area for the City of Sioux Falls and within the agricultural production area, which this area is not designated as transition or rural service area. Rural service areas is located just to the south at that interstate exit with Interstate 90. Said this area is agricultural production area because it's likely to continue as primarily farmland through the duration of the 20-year planning horizon. Goal 2, Action 2.4 on page 91 of the comprehensive plan recommends supporting growth that is compatible to the adopted municipal comprehensive plans. In the future land use plan section of the Envision 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Goal 2 aims to coordinate growth and land use planning among Minnehaha County cities, townships, and other relative organizations. The result of this coordination is cooperation between counties, cities, and townships for planning and implementing strategies and land use procedures. The subject property in looking at the comprehensive plan for the city of Sioux Falls is located just outside of the growth area in the Shape Sioux Falls 2040 comprehensive plan. The area is proposed to be identified as rural that contains vast areas of agricultural land on which urban development will not be desirable during the planning period, which is pretty much the same as what the Envision 2035 plan sets forth. So staff finds that the requested total accessory building size is relatively comparable to the existing accessory building sizes in the immediate vicinity. So staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1739 with the following conditions. 1, that the total accessory building square footage shall not exceed 1,735 square feet. 2, that the accessory building shall not exceed 35 feet in height. 3, that the building shall be an accessory use to the continued use of the property as a residential lot. 4, that only personal residential storage shall be allowed in the building and no commercial uses or commercial storage will be allowed at any time. 5, that all outdoor lighting shall be of a full cutoff and fully shielded design to prevent any spillage of light beyond the property boundaries. 6, that a building permit is required prior to construction of the accessory building. And this goes along the lines of condition number 7, that all accessory structures must comply with the 2015 International Building Code regulations, making sure that's up to standard. 8, that the Planning and Zoning Department reserves the right to enter and inspect the accessory building at any time after proper notice to the owner to ensure that the property is in full compliance with the conditional use permit conditions of approval and the revised joint zoning ordinance for the City of Sioux Falls in Minnehaha County. And one of the other staff recommendations would be to add in the declaration and abatement of public nuisances ordinance, so the Minnehaha County Public Nuisance Ordinance in the conditions. So we'd be looking to, after public input is received, is take that into consideration and adding that as a condition. And it could be included with condition number 8, or it can be its own separate condition. I'll leave that to this body to decide. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
David, I have some questions, but I'll let the commission ask any questions you may have first. Okay, my questions are this. Okay, so this sounds like we did it, now we're coming in for forgiveness. Is that what this is? The building's already up? It was built without a building permit? That's kind of what I'm understanding.
The building is up. The applicant has paid the penalty fee for constructing a building without a conditional use permit.
Inspected by our building inspector?
No.
So we don't know if it's good or not? Okay. That's the only two questions that I had. Because normally, I would think the building should be, since it's already erected, should be subject to inspection before we even consider approving this. And the next step would be enforcement if it doesn't. So you'll have your chance.
From the city side.
Kind of in agreement with Commissioner Cipher over there that based on everything that I see, wow. That, I'm trying to put this in the right terminology, is I don't know how that would ever pass any building code. I'm not an inspector. I don't build buildings. But my background is maintenance of buildings, and that would ever pass anything. So, again, agreement, it should have, based off of what we're seeing, it should have been inspected before it probably even brought to us. Because if it doesn't meet code, and if he's gonna tear it down and rebuild it, that'd be fine. But, again, I guess what I'm getting at is, we should have, I think the county probably should have went out and inspected it and said, this will meet code, this will not, so that the owner has an idea of what to expect.
You got questions? I have one more, David. So as of today, though, as far as all other issues, they're in compliance, because I know you suggested putting the nuisance deal in there as well. At
The
your
only,
site today.
yeah, the only thing is the yellow tractor that's at the front of the property, it's been in the same location for the entire period.
All right, thank you. We'll have the petitioner come up and answer.
Okay, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I ask another question?
Yes, go
So,
for it.
David, with the way the recommendations read right now, so if we were to approve this, they have to go get a building permit, and then they have to make sure that it's up to code and have it inspected and all those things, correct?
Correct.
And if it doesn't meet code, or the inspector doesn't approve, then what would happen?
Well, it'll be brought into compliance with the building code.
So they have to? There's
Yes.
no, otherwise it has to come down, correct? Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I had the same questions you did, and you did, and you did, but what buildings are we talking about? And is it permissible to construct a building without a building permit and then just pay a double permit fee and you got your building? I mean, that doesn't seem like we would want that to be the way you could go about building buildings.
So to answer your question, is to give an example, we've had property owners that have built buildings and they've fallen within that more than 4 lots in a subdivision, so they've paid a penalty fee, and they built a building without a building permit, and they needed a conditional use permit approval just to be able to get a building permit, and they've had footings or the framing already up. So
Is that known? Is that why they do it? I mean, that's what concerns me, is if it's being permitted, people would know that, so rather than get a permit, build the building and whatever way you wanted to build it, because it wasn't approved in terms of the code consistency in the permitting process, it was given a permit after it was constructed. And you know, back to my question, it seems like we got multiple buildings that are involved in this situation, and I don't know which one you're talking about.
So this is the 3-sided horse shelter that's at 15 by 30 and a half foot.
That's already been built.
This was built, and this was a part of the code enforcement process. The building that we went out and said that you need a conditional use permit because you're over 1,200 square feet. This is the request that's before us, is the 1,735 square feet.
And what is
And-
this building? Does that have a permit and a conditional use authorization?
So I think you're talking about
This is the one.
this building?
No, this building.
That's the one he
Yeah,
just
that's
showed.
the same one, different angle.
David, can
Yeah.
you clarify which building is under review for conditional use permit and the code enforcement?
So this is the building on the screen right here in front of us, is the building that is part of the code enforcement process and this process to be able to allow 1,735 square feet is the applicant's request for a conditional use permit.
Chairman.
Yes?
So David, is there another view you have of that same building, maybe at a distance or something? It seems to me I saw another one that had it. Right there, the one back?
Yeah.
Right there? No, there.
Yep.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, so the one closer right now, is that the chicken coop?
This is the 8 by 10 chicken coop.
Okay, any other questions of David? Otherwise, we'll have the petitioner come forward. Please state your name and address, please.
Judy Vandenbosch, 25982 478th Avenue of Brandon, South Dakota.
Any questions of the petitioner? I think you've heard some of our concerns.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can-
so you did not have a building permit when you built this building?
No. May I clarify 2 things about the building? The building permit, when we bought the property, when we're not real savvy about zoning or any of that stuff, but we asked our realtor, is this in any sort of subdivision, any kind of, covenants or laws that affect this? And she said no. So we took that as authoritative. We've since found out we should not have. Even so, we asked a few friends in the area, that some of our neighbors, and they said, no, you don't need a building permit for a 3-sided shed. Okay. Last fall, when we bought our equines, the guy we bought the first one from, we had a verbal contract with him to build the pasture fencing, because we know nothing about that, and to put up the shed. He had a portable shed he was going to bring. He delayed repeatedly, and finally at some point cut off communication entirely, and no idea where he fell off the face of the earth. So we were left with a 16.5 hand mule who we were trying to contain without a pasture or a building or any kind of fence. So we went out and bought the materials as quickly as we could and put up the fence, which since that went up, he was fine. The other problem was it was November by then. Snow's coming in. There has to be shelter for equines in the winter. You can't just leave them. So we poured the footings and then put that up partially. That is not a finished building. I would never allow a building to look like that on my property for a long time, but mindful that we need to put some kind of roof on it. My husband was actually on the roof putting shingles down in the snow, which if you've ever done any kind of roofing, the shingles are not going to stick. It's too cold. But there was nothing else we could do at that point. We knew it was going to come off and we'd have to replace it all. But in order to have some kind of shelter over the winter for the horses, it was all we could do. In the spring, we were planning to continue work, but prior to the weather being such that we could continue much work, we got the notification we were supposed to have a building permit. So at that point, all activity was to be ceased on the building until that was all taken care of. This is why it has not changed in state. It's not gotten any better, because we're not allowed to build on it until we have the permit. I called immediately about the building permit, and someone asked a question about that. Why it wasn't inspected maybe, or, yeah. And we asked for what the code would be that applies to it so we could begin looking at that, and he said we needed to get a variance permit first. Then he would come out and inspect the building and tell us what meets code, what doesn't meet code, what needs to be redone, changed. So it's remained in that state because we are not supposed to work on it until after the inspector can come out and work with us.
Okay.
It is not, the wood, the structural wood is either new, purchased brand new, or the fire truck building company northwest of where we live has pallets that they have told us is brand new wood, and that's where we got them. They should be structurally sound as long as we've put them up well. But yeah, that's where that was at. I believe you had other questions, but I don't recall right now.
We live in a very knowledgeable neighborhood when it comes to zoning out there, evidently, because, like I say, no matter what building you build in Minnehaha County, it's got to have a building permit. It has to be approved.
Yeah, you might be amazed at the
But that's what
low
we
level of
do. This
knowledge.
isn't the first time we've ever run into this. Believe me, we've had others over the years. So, but
And as far as the shingles blowing
yeah,
off, it's a bad situation. I walked the entire cow pasture behind us collecting shingles and anything else that had blown. I didn't see any over there, but they maintain the property very well, so I'm sure they'd already picked them up, and we're very sorry that it happened, but
Okay.
we didn't know how else to
okay, as
deal
far
with
as
it.
the other code enforcement issues that you've had,
I
as far as cleaning
believe-
stuff up, is that
I
all part of the
believe those have been
project, or-
taken care of.
Except for the yellow tractor.
The old
Oh,
tractor?
the yellow tractor. That was what we used for mowing prior to the current thing. I was actually meant to be decorative and ornamental up there. We decided to sell it because it had become an issue, and because artist daughter had decided she could she could live without it. But it does run. I've had several interested people that are considering. It's not sold at this time.
Okay.
But I figured I may as well leave it there if we're trying to sell it.
All right, thank you. Any other questioners now that you've heard?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So thank you for coming in. You know, the appearance of the current structure is pretty bad, really.
Yeah.
And do you have a vision about how it will look when you're done? Are you going to put regular siding on it, or
Probably not, probably wood type of siding. If you've
scrap
seen
wood siding?
the 6-foot cedar fences that have the top of the wood goes like that,
Uh-huh.
we're looking at using that as the exterior panels, and then either staining or painting them.
Mr. Chairman, do you, I'm going to just ask the planning department, they can answer later, but so are there standards for what the siding should be on a structure like this, or do you get to,
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is, and the applicant's correct, she needs to get the conditional use permit first. I mean, our office is not gonna issue a building permit until we resolve the conditional use permit. If this gets resolved, she comes in and gets a building permit, and then it's gonna be the property owner's responsibility to work with the building inspector to make sure it meets code. So, to answer your question, they come in and get a building permit, and then that's gonna start a new process of them working with the building inspector to make sure it meets the code. So I'll make that clear to everyone, and that's hopefully also clear to you.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you,
Mr.
Scott.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So simply put, you know, if we were to approve this tonight, we're not approving necessarily this particular structure, we're simply approving the larger square
You're
footage.
approving the larger size.
Right.
Then it's gonna be incumbent on the applicant, the property owners, to make sure that they then come in and get a building permit, for which they will pay double as a penalty. And then the building, that will trigger the building inspector to go out and start working with them to make sure the footings, and as Commissioner Cipher said, this isn't the first time that we've had building violations, but the property owner is gonna have to work with the building inspector to somehow demonstrate that the footings are the right size and go from there. I mean, he may say, dig one out and show me. I mean, he has every right to do that, or make him rip it out and pour new ones. But we try to work with the applicants and make it as least painful, but we are going to make sure that it's meets the code.
Any other questions?
Any questions
Questions
from the
over
city
here?
side?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience care to address this? Yes, come forward, please. State your name and address.
My name is Kevin Newheisel. We own the property just north of Van den Bosch's. I live at 25980 478th Avenue in Brandon.
Yes.
So, we're not here to contest the square footage. Not at all. We bought our property in 1999. It was the first acreage bought to the north from the Citic addition. We built our home there, the home that we wish to retire in and stay in. Our windows face south and east. So our living room windows face right to the property in question. Can I show you some pictures? Maybe can you help me?
That red dot is where you live, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. I want to stick pictures. So this is, imagine 14 years ago, none of this was here, okay? So that was our view out to the back, out to the south. Now, we can't pick our neighbors, I understand that. We have nothing against the Van den Bosch's, this is my wife over here. But they devalue our property, they devalue their own property. Those buildings do not even match anything on their property. The new one does. Okay? That is one picture of what we see every day. That is the second picture. We try to improve our property each and every day, each and every year. I plant trees. I can't make these trees grow any faster to cover up what I have to see now. I'm asking the commission and the planning zone, and you've kind of covered some of it, that they have to build buildings that make code. We have to. If I do some electrical work or if I do some work on my house, we built a sun porch facing that way 2 years ago. This is what we get to look at. That's what it looks like. Another picture. This is a building that we're comparing to. Only for square footage, but this is one of the neighbors. This is another one of the neighbors. All of the properties in the area are kept very well and very nice. All we are asking is to consider they can build 1,735 square feet. They can have 310 foot of horse coverage. We want it up to code. We want it something that you can look out and not be embarrassed to show somebody that comes to visit your house. That's what I'm asking. Okay? So if you grant the condition of use despite our objections, at the very least we ask that they be held to whatever building codes are there. And I know the building codes are stringent. Someday I might want to build on a building, so I'm okay with more square footage and there's bigger square foot buildings. The current structure does not and will not meet even the simplest codes. I know a little bit about codes. I built a house. Substandard buildings such as this only devalue the owner's property, which they don't seem to care, but it also devalues the properties in the neighborhood. And I built my property as an investment and a place to live and retire. So I thank you for your time, and I ask that you consider our request. And again, I have nothing against the Vanden Bosches. They can build their building, but they put a chicken coop on, they have no siding, they paint nothing. Most of the stuff that they build out of scrap. So,
All right, thank you.
okay.
Appreciate your comments. Okay, anyone else in the audience care to address this? If not, we'll look to close the floor and look to commission for action, for discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you know, because of all the complaints we've had, I am a little bit reluctant to carry this forward too, but I think David had indicated that we could add an additional condition about the public nuisance.
About the county public nuisance ordinance.
And I think that's a condition that should be put on this particular condition.
You had
Yes,
mentioned
please,
just adding that to number 8, correct?
Adding it to number 8 at the end of it, and have a list for adding a new condition.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what exactly does it say, David?
I had at the end, so, and well, it's the title is the Declaration of Favor of Public Nuisance. And C 33-04 is the title.
Okay, so we're just gonna add the title of the public nuisance?
That they must be in compliance with.
And adding it on after the revised joint zoning ordinance for the city of Sioux Falls.
I think that's helpful. I'm not sure it's sufficient, so if Bonnie made a motion, I'll second it.
She hasn't made a motion yet.
Bonnie?
I will.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. I think we may have to work further on this.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, we have a motion and second to approve with the additional condition.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
not to approve the whole thing, I guess I would just like to add that condition.
Just add the
Number
condition.
8.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Okay, so I have a motion and second to add that additional condition
And then further consider
for
things.
the considerations. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, the condition will be added. Okay,
Okay, and on the city side, any questions first before?
Mr. Chair, one question, don't they already have to comply with that? Okay, so I just wonder what purpose does putting it onto the conditional use permit do?
Well, it's for the particular building size, the conditional use permit.
So if they don't, meet the nuisance ordinance, then they would have to take buildings down to meet the 1,200 square foot size?
So we can bring that back to the planning commission.
Alright.
They're not meeting the condition.
I had another question, I don't know, it may help or not. What if we don't approve this? What is left for you to do and for the owner to do in terms of working out of this situation? I mean, obviously, it isn't ideal. There's issues related to it. What's the solution then that you could exercise, you know, with your authority or with existing ordinances or otherwise that would address the concerns that we've brought up?
We continue the code enforcement process and working with the landowner. If they don't comply, then we can take it to the county commission as an alternative to.
You're talking about the things on their property. I'm talking about the building.
Yeah, that would be part of the, if they built it without a building permit, and they were unable to get the building permit, would be that if you denied the variant or the conditional use permit request tonight, they would be limited to 1,200 square feet, and as such, we would enforce the removal of that structure. I mean, that's the ultimate code enforcement, but the next step would probably be that someone would appeal this to the joint city-county commissions, and we would hear this all again. But ultimately, to rectify the situation, if a conditional use permit is not granted, and if it went to the city-county commission and they decided also to uphold your decision, we would have no other choice but to pursue the removal of the building.
Thank you, Scott.
Commissioners, I really raised the question earlier about the structure of the building and all of that stuff. We're here as a land use body. Is this building, just ignore that building that's there, is building a three-sided building that meets code and is in compliant with everything else, a bad use for this this land? Can you say that we can't, that somebody couldn't build a three-sided building? We have to ignore this, because once we approve or disapprove, say we approve this, okay, now they have to meet all of the codes. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if I looked at the building and said, and I raised that question earlier, is that's just unsightly, it's not very good. But we're here to decide whether building a three-sided building or what, another 1,200 square foot building is good for this site. I think that's what we gotta look at.
Mr. Chair, to keep the motion similar, I'll make whatever motion happened over there, same on the city side.
I would second that.
So it's been moved and seconded to add MC 33-04 to the extra conditions as condition number 9.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries on the city side.
Mr. Chairman, I guess in regards to Steve's point, I think that this is a rural residence where having some small number of horses or equine seems reasonable. That said, I've seen some gorgeous barns out there, and they don't look exactly like an automobile garage, and certainly there is, by the nature of that, some different sounds and smells and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is not a bad idea to have an acreage where you have shelter for your animals, et cetera. And but it is a pretty, it's not up to what the standard we would want for that kind of a building. So how do we get to where we want it to be?
Like I say, I agree with Steve too. I get back to that, this is about land use. The building will be regulated by the planning department. And we just approved, well, it didn't look like this, but I know what a three-sided horse barn just like this, well, it was either 2 months ago. So it's not unusual, it's appropriate, it's just, it has to be done right.
Mr. Chair, I would, excuse me, I would agree with that, and I think our best course action, in my opinion, is to approve it based on the comments that were just made as far as this type of building, knowing that the ordinances are gonna be enforced, the code is gonna be enforced. To get this thing done right, if it's gonna be done right, I think we need to let it move forward from this body so that those things can happen and get this fixed. With that, I would make a motion to approve as amended with that additional condition.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval with the additional condition that was added, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries on the county side.
City side?
Sure, I'll make the same motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve as listed with the extra condition. Any other discussion?
Well, with, when I was looking at this, my eye went to recommendation for a number 7, that it comply with the 2015 International Building Code regulations, which Nick was referring to earlier in this conversation. So as long as they comply to, to code, then it should be okay. And as the neighbor eloquently said too, there's, again, we're land use and I think that's appropriate for this particular property.
Mr. Chair, if we want prettier buildings, we can update the code and have that enforced on everybody, but, so I'm in support of this one.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries on the city side.
Okay, thank you. That would concludes our
Move
city
to adjourn.
county agenda.
Second.
The moved and seconded to adjourn the city side. We are adjourned.
All in favor, signify
Let
by
that
saying
clear out, then we'll reconvene as the Board of Adjustment.